Hi, everyone. I am so thrilled for today's guest. When I was preparing for this interview, I was reading back on my notes when I went on this retreat with Carolyn. It was about a year and a half ago, and it was so crazy how I got aligned to go on this Mallorca trip with her. So basically, I got this crazy astrology read, and she had told me that I had this deep connection to the ley lines. And I literally had no idea what ley lines were. I'm like, what is she talking about? So I sent it to my best friend, the reading, and she listened to it. And literally the day after, she takes a yoga class in Boston from Carolyn. And Carolyn says, hello, everyone. I'm doing a yoga retreat in Mallorca, Spain, and we're going to be uncovering ley lines. And my best friend literally called me. She was like, we need to do this. I was like, signs from the universe, done. And oh my God, it was so unbelievably worth it. She truly is a master at what she does. I think that experience was a complete turning point, if not one of the biggest catapults to my awakening journey, because it happened at a time where I was going through a lot of transformation and really understanding and letting go of my old belief systems and really understanding what it is that having a spiritual awakening or growth process is like, right? I'm like, what are ley lines? What is energy? Like, what is this stuff? And she was so integral because she really talked about the subconscious mind, and she brought to surface so easily, and she held such beautiful space for just these limiting beliefs and thoughts that I just really didn't even know that were there. And I mean, we were in like the most beautiful estate in Mallorca with, oh my God, so amazing. And if you listen to my solo episode, you know, I talked about where I put blood on my face and I got connected to my period blood and like who I am as a woman. And Carolyn is the person that did that. And she has been an integral part in me really changing the way that I look at myself. So I am so grateful for her. And now we're great friends and she's doing amazing things. And I'm so excited to bring her on because we're really going to talk about the subconscious mind and how we can really dig into what it is that our brain is actually trying to tell us and communicate to us and where that lies and why it's so important to bring it up and just start really changing the subconscious brain in order to live a life of fulfillment and passion, something that makes you happy no matter what area of life you're in. So a little bit about Carolyn. Carolyn Little is a transformational life coach and a yoga meditation teacher who has dedicated over 20 years of her life to the pursuit of holistic well-being through healing, embodiment, social justice, and spiritual growth. Carolyn has had the privilege to work with thousands of people in trainings and retreats around the world, as well as in Fortune 500 companies. She is a board-certified holistic health practitioner, 1,000 plus hour registered yoga teacher, and Reiki master. She has completed trainings in positive intelligence and mindfulness, meditation, and holds a graduate degree in social justice in intercultural relations, which allows Carolyn to provide a very unique approach to health and well-being as she guides you to the most rewarding journey of self-realization, so you can discover your true power, purpose, and passion. I definitely know that that's what she did for me. So let's dig in. Without further ado, here's Carolyn. Hi, Carolyn.
Hi, Natalia.
How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm really happy to be here with you right now.
Oh my God, me too. I'm so honored to have you on today. I was just saying how working with you when we went to Mallorca, that trip was so much fun.
Oh, we had an incredible time. It was truly such a journey.
Oh my God. It was like, so basically Carolyn hosted a retreat in Mallorca in like this beautiful estate. And it was so magical. Just everything from the food, like we have to talk about like the food that we ate. It was like, well, what program did you use? Was it like garden to table?
Yeah, it was a farm to table. It was a local chef that was from the island of Mallorca. So he was super skilled in not only creating these beautiful, healthy culinary dishes, but also of traditional Mallorquin cuisine. So yeah, it was pretty phenomenal.
Yeah, his name was Raphael, and we were all orgasming as we ate all of his food.
Absolutely. It was the full sensory experience and how we could tap into that pleasure in everything. So the food is a big part of that.
I love that. I to this day, I still don't think that I have tasted food as good as that. And at some point in the episode, I'm going to put some clips from when we were doing that. And so y'all can get a little taste of what we were tasting.
That will be fun.
It will be fun. Oh my God. So yeah, so I wanted to talk, well, first of all, I wanted to ask you, because every experience for every person is different. So what would you say that your spiritual awakening journey was like for you?
I love this question. And I also love hearing this from so many people as well. For me, there wasn't necessarily like one spectacular event that really opened things or shifted things. It was a series of events in my life, starting from the fact that I grew up in a pretty unstable household. There were a lot of challenges. My parents loved us, of course, but my dad was a Vietnam vet who went into corporate America. My mom was a teacher. There is a history of addiction, abuse in my family, and so there were moments when I was young, probably in middle school, that I remember that I would leave the house and go down the road and lay in this field and just be with the stars and just be with this force that I didn't know how to explain back then, but it was definitely greater than me. And it was where I found the sense of solace. And that's really where I started, a conversation with something greater than myself. And I also was raised in the Presbyterian church. So I grew up Christian, going to church, and outside of the community, it just didn't resonate with me so much. So, I just bring that up because alongside this in my life, religion didn't have so much of a place. I feel like that's where my spiritual exploration started. And then it continued on with just numerous different events of following my intuition and moving to some spectacular places and tapping into nature there and just noticing the people who really truly are angels in our lives that show up at those times and that are such gifts. So there's lots more stories that could come from there.
Yeah. Oh my God. I was getting chills when you were saying that, because I had a similar experience. Like, I remember that when things would get too intense in my house, I would go to a park and I would put my feet on the ground and I would look. I was always so connected to the moon. I didn't know what it was. I didn't know what the connection was, but I just would look at the moon and I would just say, just allow kind of everything to fill me with peace. So yeah, I resonate a lot with that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I'm actually curious what your thoughts are, because I know that sometimes people think that there isn't a difference between spirituality and religion. What would you say that your main difference is? Because I grew up Catholic and I have the same thing. Like, when I was in the church, it never resonated with me. I remember being 12 and being like, this doesn't feel right. And I just didn't want to go back.
Mm-hmm. Well, there can definitely be aspects of religion that are very spiritual.
Yeah.
And I see that across different religions, and I appreciate that immensely. There also is the aspect of religion being the institution.
Mm-hmm.
And
that's what turns people off, like, because people think that spirituality is like also being part of an institution, but I feel like it's different, right?
Right. So the way that I would describe the difference of it is that religion is this institution, whereas spirituality is a very individual, personal journey. So everyone has a spiritual connection and they relate to that in their own way.
Yeah.
So that's where I feel the difference for myself, and where I notice others also experience it in that way.
Yeah, for sure. And then it's funny, people, say the same thing, it's incremental, right? And then, and it happens to me too, that there are just like these incremental moments where things click and sink in much deeper. Were there any moments for you or any experiences that you had where it kind of dropped in for you more than understanding that you just had a connection with a higher source or power?
I often found it in connection to nature. So I had the gift of living in Hawaii for a while.
Oh my
And when I was there, yes, living in a VW bus, just totally.
Okay. Well, that's why you found God there.
In some ways, definitely. So there's definitely a thing, just certain places in nature, I feel that we can just tap into that feeling so deeply.
Mm-hmm.
Hawaii was very much one for me. Bali is another one. Certain places in Central and South America that I've been, those have all been moments in my life that have been powerful in tapping into that spirituality and that essence that exists around us all the time. But then there was a point in my life that I never identified myself as being spiritual.
Mm-hmm.
And this was probably when I was like late teens, in undergrad. And I remember having a conversation with one of my really good friends who reflected back to me just how spiritual I was. And to me, that was like a surprise. I was, I was like, really? and that still holds such a place in my memory, such a simple moment. But it was almost like it gave me permission to sink deeper into that part of myself that really connected with spirituality and wanted to explore what that meant in my life. And so that led to a series of events of connecting with elders from different lineages and tapping into spiritual practices from different cultures and seeing how that also connects with my lineage, my ancestry, and that how some of those cultures that I'm not connected to through my ancestry, how I want to tap into those more.
Yeah. That's why I love studying with so many different people and having a diverse way of learning different things from different people, because when you know that you're on a spiritual path, you understand that everyone is taking things from completely different places. It's like you won't meet a single spiritual teacher that will have the same, methodology, because it's like whatever you pick up along the way. And about the books, about what your friend said, literally, I have the same thing. I'm not, I was like, and I was like in spiritual denial. I was like, I'm not a spiritual person. And then every single one of my books was about Buddhism, spirituality, mindset, literally anything that had to do with awakening yourself, or just working on yourself. Or I don't like it that they call it self-help, because it makes it seem like we have a problem, as opposed to just no, remember who you are. That's why you're reading this. It's not to help or fix anything. But anyway.
No, I'm so glad that you just brought that up. I forgot it even used to be called self-help. Because really our journey of spirituality is a coming home to ourselves.
Exactly.
There's something so tangible and so human about our spiritual experience. I know it can be related to in very esoteric terms, yet it is very much in our humanity that we discover our spirituality.
Yeah, exactly. It's a coming home to us. And I never really understood that ever in this process, until I had more books in my life that kind of, and more teachers and more experiences that really just made it sink deeper and deeper and deeper. And now even with the work that I do, it's understanding that we're all unconditional love, right? That it's coming back to that sense and kind of just letting go of everything else.
Yeah, I love how the Dalai Lama talks about it, that our spiritual journey is one of cultivating the qualities of compassion and curiosity, empathy.
Yes.
And
exactly.
Joy.
Yeah, joy. Oh, perfect. Perfect. So tell us, how do people actually create a happy life?
Very good question.
Yeah, right? Let's get to it.
I mean, it's the question that everyone is asking.
Yeah, everyone just wants to be happy. We all just want the quest for happiness.
So we are conditioned in a lot of ways of what happiness, what gaining success is in our lives. from the time that we're born. It's in our culture, it comes from our families. And often this quest for happiness exists in these certain accomplishments in our life, right? So we almost have this like checklist of, how happy you're going to be when you graduate from high school, and then you get into the school of your dreams, and then you graduate from the school of your dreams and you get the job of your dreams. And then you meet the person of your dreams, and then you have the family of your dreams. But every time, right, that thing that it's that next check, it's that next goal, where does that put happiness for us?
Yeah.
Right? It's always outside of us. It's always something that we're striving for.
And
so
external.
It's always external. It's always just beyond our reach. And even when we accomplish those things, we might experience happiness, but it's fleeting because it's like, well, now I have to do the next thing. So happiness in that realm is always outside of us, which makes it very hard for us to actually be in a state of happiness in the moment to moment in our life. So when we look at that on the other side of the coin, what is it to cultivate happiness in our day-to-day, in our moment to moment? And I believe it's truly a process of coming into all of who you are. That when we embark on this journey of really deconstructing who we are, what are the beliefs that we hold? What have we been conditioned with from our culture, from our families? What in that is even true for me? And how can that, that coming home to oneself creates a contentment. Creates a contentment for where we are, and we start to shift that perspective into finding the happiness in the journey, finding happiness in the day-to-day, in the moments in our lives, rather than in what it is in that next goal and that next accomplishment.
Yeah, I mean, and I don't know if this is true for a lot of people, but I know that for myself, I never resonated with my family's belief systems ever since I was really young. So it was something that when I was little, I didn't fully understand why when my parents would say something to me and I'd be like, wait, but I don't think that's true. And it confused me for a really long time because something inside me, my deeper knowing knew that it was either coming from fear or definitely based from fear or just shame or guilt or anger. And I felt it and I didn't know how to express that. So, you kind of touched on it, but where do you believe our beliefs come from? And like, how do we differentiate what beliefs are ours and what are the external ones that are put on us?
That's a great question. And, there's parts of doing this work, across numerous different methodologies, but looking at part of my background is in social justice and intercultural relations. And that work, a lot of that work is deconstructing our societies, how our societies formed, how are they maintained, where is power held. And so a big part of that was also looking at ourselves and doing that self-deconstruction work of who we are. What is our impact when we go to another country? What is our impact when we enter into different groups of people? And so that's just one part of it that I'll speak to. There's also another part that's really rooted in yoga. And I think this is missed in the West in how we relate to yoga and look at yoga. But that self-study is such a huge foundation of yoga, which really means to yoke, to union, to come into union. So we have to do that self-deconstruction work in order to understand who we are.
Right.
So in that, it's a process of inquiry. And just like your intuition was showing you, some of these things don't really resonate. And that's a beautiful opportunity to ask yourself, well, what in this is true for me? what do I actually believe this? And I think when we do that check in with ourselves, we realize like, wow, this is something that I heard my parents say a lot of times, or this is a belief that is valued in our culture and reflected back to me so strongly in our culture, but it doesn't actually resonate with me. I think about right now how strong we are ingrained with our value wrapped up in our productivity.
Oh my God, yeah.
Right? So what we produce equates our value, our worth. The more that we can produce, the more worthwhile we are, right? So yes, there's all kinds of benefits to what we create, what we produce in the world. Don't get me wrong.
Of course.
There also is, we're just so out of balance. So, when I really check in with myself of what I believe, and I'm glad that this has been cultivated too over time, is the value of space, the value of the spaces in between, the value of being able to integrate experiences and not needing to just go to the next one and the next one and the next one.
Yeah. Because you're an entrepreneur, you're a practitioner, you're a healer, you bring this service, right? And recently I saw in your newsletter that you took 2 weeks off, and you were like, even like, oh my God, is like, can I do this? So how was that for you? How was like that process of you just actually deciding? Because a lot of people that are entrepreneurs or work for themselves, it can be challenging to make that feels like a really long time in this mind that we create for ourselves, right? But how did it feel? And like, how was that?
Yeah, great question. So, one, it was a bit nerve-wracking.
Yeah. It's like 2 weeks. Oh my God.
And two, it was just such a wonderful time to practice this literally within the inner space of valuing this time that I'm giving myself, right? And to do it without judging myself or feeling like I'm going to be behind. I know that's the biggest thought that comes in.
Yeah.
Oh my God, I'm going to be so behind. I'm taking these 2 weeks off before the start of the year. I'm crazy. I'm not going to be set up for this year to come and all this other stuff, right? Whereas, when I really tapped into what I needed, it was the space to integrate everything that we'd been through in 2020 and to also get really creative. So I needed to tap into this creative energy. And this is important, especially as entrepreneurs, because this is where true innovation comes out for us. This is when some of our greatest ideas come up. And because we're not confined by this, schedule that we've laid out of everything that has to be done, we have the ability to really get into this innovative, creative energy. Yeah. So I started, just using my hands and creating these beautiful decorations for the holiday. Literally, they were all like based on natural things. So it was really fun.
Yeah, I saw the pictures. It was beautiful. I'm a witness. It was great. Yeah, and it's all the things that we want to do. It's like that's why we're alive. That's why we want to live our life, to be just tapped into that flow, And now as I'm, doing that, it's the same thing. When I left my nonprofit, I was just like, oh my God, I have to like start the next thing like right away. Like I have to know exactly what I'm doing. And like I gave myself like a month of just downtime, and every moment I was just like, I couldn't even believe that I was doing that. I've never allowed myself a month of just rest. I think that after we get out of school, there isn't that period of, summer vacation. And it's like, I felt so guilty, but the most beautiful like inspirations happened in that moment.
Yes. Yeah. Yes.
It was like I delved deep into so many things. I was getting such clear messages of what to do next because I allowed myself to rest.
Absolutely. Oh, I love that. Yes, because that's exactly what we have the opportunity for when we release the burden of this pressure of
Exactly.
what we think we should be doing.
Exactly.
Right? That pressure that we put on ourselves when we come into all these like shoulds, you know?
Yeah, the shoulds are the worst. I've been working on the shoulds with my therapist for like 2 years. Like no more shoulds, just no more
I'm
shoulds.
sure you've heard this saying, stop shitting on yourself.
Yeah, no, 100%. Going back to the whole belief system, where do you think that comes from? Us thinking about the shoulds.
Well, it's wrapped up into that same conditioning
Of
these
productivity.
expectations and of what our definition is of success. So that's often where I start with a lot of clients when we begin working together, is deconstructing what is your definition of success.
That's
How
huge.
does that drive your decisions and your behaviors in life? And is that really true?
And I know that you also touch on the differences between the analytical mind and the intuitive heart, because I feel like in those moments, it can be challenging to understand what the difference is from the messages that you're receiving from your heart versus your mind. So how can we know the difference of those?
That takes practice. It really takes practice. It
It does.
the time for us to cultivate the ability to listen in and to feel. So we can feel when there is something that is coming from our heart. We feel it viscerally in our body. The analytical mind is great for us figuring out logistics and, you know, all the planning things and stuff like that in life. It serves a very useful purpose.
Totally.
But it's not what we want necessarily calling the shots.
Right. And it does. In this society, we're like only taught to use our analytical mind and just to be like, oh, you feel something? Like, don't trust it. Like, we don't trust what we feel in our hearts. It's like, it's such a big thing that I've had to deconstruct for myself.
Mm-hmm. And you think about it, you know, listening to your body and cultivating that ability purely from, you know, the saying, listen to your gut. Your gut knows. Like, what's your gut response?
Or listen to your heart.
Right, exactly. And when we often get ourselves in trouble is when we don't listen.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. 100%.
We've all done it, you know, we've all done it numerous times.
Do you feel like that's a form of control and also gripping? I know that's with some of the people that I'm working with, they're just having such a difficult time. They receive messages so clearly and they just decide to not go with it and their analytical mind takes over. I know you said that it takes practice, but is there any other piece of advice for people that are first starting on this aspect of really like paying attention to both? Like, what does that feel for you, like in your body and stuff like that, if you can get a little bit more specific?
So it also goes hand in hand with cultivating our own self-trust. So if we're going to listen to ourselves and listen to these messages that are coming through, in order to take those action steps in relationship to those messages, we need to trust ourselves. And that comes through practice and trying things. And also, it's helpful to acknowledge when we've made decisions that we've trusted our gut, that maybe others are telling us to do something else, you know? And when we've said, no, I really feel this, I'm going to make this decision. And so acknowledging the moments when we do that, I think is really important.
Yeah, I agree.
Because that's how we start to build that self-trust of like, oh, I did it this time and I did it this time and this is how it turned out.
Yeah, for sure.
So for me, I feel there's different visceral things. I pay attention a lot to the tension in my body. So when I'm in my analytical mind or I'm in that place of shoulding, putting that pressure on myself, I'm usually really tense. And if I can bring myself to the awareness to even notice that tension, then I have the ability to take a breath, take a step back, create a little distance around the situation, whatever I'm trying to figure out, and meet it from a new perspective.
Yeah, and that does take a lot of practice, definitely, because you have to just become extremely aware of what's actually happening in your body. I feel like there's a big disconnect right now between us actually knowing what's going on with our internal bodies and trusting people outside of us to tell us the answers.
Yeah. And I think that's one way that a lot of us have been conditioned is to, in our medical system of putting all of our trust into doctors and yes, listen to their expertise and know your body, learn your
Exactly.
body.
Yeah. Absolutely. I know that with anything with doctors, like I always go in and I listen, but at the end of the day, I know that my body, if it's going to have a negative reaction to something, like I need to listen to my body, definitely. And it's always led me in the right direction. Where do you think it comes from for us not to trust ourselves? Do you think that that's a generational thing? Do you think that comes from childhood or from society? What is this aspect? Because I keep on seeing it again and again with more clients, like that they can't tap into their intuition because they don't trust themselves.
Mm-hmm. I do think that there's a big piece of that in our formative years, depending on the environment in which we were raised.
That makes a lot of sense.
And yeah, so when we're really young, if we're given the space to express our emotions, and if our parents are asking us to, explain where those, like, what's that emotion about? What are you, really getting curious about what is happening at that moment for that child also validates that for the child. Wrong. So, I mean, that's one example how that conditioning can come out. Because let's say, for instance, a child is really upset and crying, and a parent is like, "Oh, just stop crying, you're fine." Right. So instantly that tells the child, well, what I'm experiencing isn't valid. I just need to be fine. So they cut that part of themselves off and do what needs to be done in order to get the approval of the parent in that moment.
That makes a lot of sense. Then because in our culture, we're just conditioned to just say, hey, you know what? Like, don't feel bad.
Right.
Don't feel bad. You feel bad? Feel good. Like, no, what? Yeah, for sure. So with that, I know that something that you went over with us in Mallorca was the 4 different roles that children take from like age 0 to 7. Can you take us through that? Because I remember loving that.
Yeah, definitely. So before I get into those 4 roles, it's helpful to understand that when we come into this world as a baby, we are wide open. We are just taking in everything around us. There's an awe, there's a wonderment, there's a curiosity.
Yeah.
And that's our natural state as human beings. So as we're starting to grow into little beings, into toddlers and children, through certain experiences with our family, our main goal is to receive the attention and the affection that we need. So when that doesn't happen, and it's not by fault, it could be an environment for a child that is harmful and challenging, but it doesn't even need to be some big event.
Right. Because I think sometimes people think that it has to be this like physical abuse or just like something extreme, but it could be something as simple as parents just negating child's like emotional needs.
Right, exactly. And so, there are experiences of great trauma, and then there's also others that are not that traumatic. But like I said, when we're that wide open, we don't have the analytical mind yet that has formed to say, oh, my parent is really stressed over this thing because trying to do it work. So therefore, they can't give me the attention that I need right now. We just take it as rejection.
Right.
So this is the development of our ego. So our ego starts to form in those first 7 years of our life. And that ego forms in order for our survival. So we start to learn certain ways of how to be in the world in order to get our fundamental needs met. So that ends up forming 4 roles essentially that we take on as children. And so one is being the gifted one. Another one is being the victim or sick. Another one is the caregiver. And then the other one is the rebel.
Can you take us a little explanation of each one of what it means?
Sure. So the gifted one is the child who learns that as long as they're doing everything right, they're going to get the praise and the approval that they desire. So for instance, if someone in that situation grew up in an unstable household where things were pretty just traumatic, but they know that for them, things are okay as long as they get straight A's and that they are the head of every club and the captain of every team, then their world is safe.
Got it.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. That does make sense.
So it's similar with like the victim. So someone would take on the victim persona or being sick, knowing that they're going to get that attention from whoever it is that they want that attention from. The caregiver is someone who maybe grew up with a family who the parents were dealing with some kind of real challenge, addiction, illness. And so the child learned at a very young age that they needed to take care of others. And so they tend to assume that role later on in life as well.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's me.
Yeah, so it gives us our value. I also want to point out that there's two sides to it. It ends up being one, our superpower, and also our greatest trap.
Yes. Yeah. I know. You're telling me.
And then the fourth one is the rebel. And I think we can, all kind of get the view of the rebel, the person who's the outsider. And that's another persona that's taken on to create this false sense of safety. So all of these roles we create in order to have our fundamental needs met as children. And they become part of our ego. So it's really helpful to understand which one of those you resonate with.
So do you feel like that happens what happens if a child grows up in a very like healthy household? Does it still take on one of those roles?
Yeah, there's definitely still elements that come in. They just might not be as strong. A person that is raised in a household where there's clear boundaries and emotions are able to be expressed and there isn't codependency, right? Then this child is being raised with a really strong foundation of self, of who they are, how they can express themselves, the boundaries that they have set for themselves. So they might have, bits and pieces of those 4 characteristics that might come in, here and there.
But it doesn't run the show, like what you were saying.
Exactly.
Got it. That makes a lot of sense. So then why would you say that releasing these old patterns and beliefs is important to take your life back?
So I would say that rather than releasing them, we're really bringing the awareness to them that they're a part of who we are. Because when we have the awareness of, this is my ego kicking in right now. This is me needing to be the gifted one because I feel unsafe in this moment. And if I really take a step back and notice that I'm creating more disconnect by trying to show how perfect I am, that I can come back into my humanity and create space to connect again with whoever I'm really desiring to connect with.
I love, that's so beautiful. I love that. Yeah.
So it's the awareness of it. And also realizing, like I said, that there's 2 sides to the coin, that it gives us our superpower. Like as someone who you identified with being the caretaker, you're also an amazing person who looks after your friends.
Yes, I do.
Goes out of your way to be there for people. And what a gift. Right?
Yeah, it is one of the most beautiful parts of me. I've had to shift that mentality for myself of seeing it as such a negative thing because it was so self-sacrificing so many times. But until I really started reining in the boundaries and understanding what you're talking about, then I can give from a place where I feel full, so it doesn't feel depleting.
Yeah, that's spot on. And that's where we start to find our balance. And also where we notice when we're in a trap, right? When you start to notice that you're getting depleted, that's when you say, oh, just a second, Natalia, I need to check in.
Right.
Where am I overextending? Where have I not set a boundary?
Yeah.
And then you come back and then you self-regulate.
Yeah, I love that. I want to talk more about like our experience together in the retreat in Mallorca.
Yeah.
And well, first I want to start off by asking, because I know that some people like, they see it in yoga studios or, situations like that. And sometimes the cost can be, a little bit much or things like that. But I mean, to me, it was like it's priceless what you get from a retreat. But I want to know what your thoughts on the importance of a retreat. Why is it important for us to do retreats and go somewhere else and kind of just take that time for ourselves?
Yeah, this reason is exactly why I love creating them.
Oh my God. And she's a master, let me tell you.
Thank you. Thank you. When we take ourselves out of our day-to-day life, a familiar environment, usually we're in a routine of what we're doing, that makes our life very familiar in how it is. So when we remove ourselves from that and we're in a completely different environment that is inspirational, maybe it's a tropical environment or Mallorca where there's beautiful colors of the island.
Like I remember going to Dea and it was like oh God, I was like, it's just the energy there. It's just like, I literally felt like I was on a cloud. It was unbelievable.
Yeah. Dea is a truly magical place.
It is.
So it starts to shift us into a different part of our brain. It opens up the part of our brain that accesses potential and possibility. It's really hard for us to access that when we're in our day-to-day life because we're just so set on the next thing that needs to be done. And we're in this we have almost blinders on.
That makes sense.
But then you go on a retreat, you're in this new environment, and especially if it's an experience that is created to foster that development and growth, that all of these elements come together. And that's what I like to focus on is how are we being nourished through all our senses? And when we're really in this place of nourishment and pleasure and delight, that's where we can start to access the possibility of what we want and start to go into that place of dreaming, right? Because we're in potential. It's possible.
Yeah.
So when we start to create the dream of our life in that place, it comes with inspiration, it comes with momentum, and especially if there's support once you leave that experience and go back to your life of then how to implement that, of how to actually make that actionable, then it's tangible in your life. But for the retreat experience itself, I love just giving people the snapshot of this is what is possible.
Yeah.
This is what is possible to feel this good in your body.
In your body, in your life. And that's something that I remember sharing with you. I don't know, since it was a while ago, if you remember, but there were moments where I was like, Carolyn, like, this is a lot. Like, I can't believe, like I was having kind of like an out of body experience. Like I couldn't connect. My analytical brain just wanted to be like, no, this is wrong. You shouldn't be here. Like, this is way too good to be true. And there was a part of me the entire time that I was like, this is so much, but it was so nourishing.
Yeah. 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 I love that you just brought that up because it's a great example of how we cut ourselves off from experiencing that pleasure too. Of either we feel guilty about it or not fully deserving of it.
Yeah, like who am I to be in this like private, villa with like orange trees? I couldn't even believe that I had manifested something like that, right?
I know, and congratulations. You showed up.
Thank you. I did. I showed the fuck up. I did it. I made it happen. I was saying like that story about the ley lines and how with Audrey, with my best friend, that you mentioned it and how synchronistic it was and how we were just like, you know what, we're going to do it. And like, we just made it happen. And like, that's a testament to, I didn't have all the money in the world, but because I had such a strong intention and my heart was calling for it and my soul was calling for it, I found it was possible.
Yeah. The first time I chose to go on a retreat with one of my longtime teachers, I was like, it was scary. I'm like, am I really going to spend this? Am I going to what? Like, you can't do this. You've got da 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 da. And, you know, so to take the leap and give that to yourself is a huge investment in yourself. It's the greatest gift I think you can give yourself, that gift of experience, that gift of growth. And with that, I also want to say that if you're choosing to go on a retreat, know what your intention is around it. Totally. Like, what do you want to get out of it? And then make sure that that aligns with, you know, the experience you're choosing to go on and who you're choosing to go on a retreat with.
Yeah. And because the thing that I loved about ours is like that there were so many different elements, right? We visited different parts of Mallorca. We saw the culture, we tasted the food. Then we also had those moments where you led us through different, you know, subconscious, you know, work and then, you know, you're amazing. What do we call you? Me and Audrey, we call you the fire queen. She's like she's like the fire whisperer. Like, Carolyn is amazing. And how we all like sat in the because there was like I believe a full moon in Scorpio, and we celebrated the full moon, and we honored all the different elements and placements of the earth, and it connected me so deeply to it, and then also. I remember that I believe it was Audrey that she was going through her moon cycle, and that she, you know, that you shared that experience of getting actually connected to our period blood. And that was like huge for me. Can you talk a little bit more about how women aren't connected to that part of themselves and why it's so important to be?
Yeah. Yeah. So much of this time that we're in is this reclaiming of our feminine energy. And with that, it's a reconnection to the earth. It's the reconnection to nature. It's the reconnection to the natural cycles of not just the seasons, but the natural cycles within ourselves. And as women, we've been gifted with this beautiful cycle of purification of our menstruation. And it's been, you know, so like demonized and over the years, and so much stigma around it and shame around it that it's become a really painful time for a lot of women.
Yeah.
And that's just deeply sad. The first blood ceremony that I went to, was so incredibly moving. Mm-hmm. It was such a moment of just releasing all of that shame and releasing that stigma around something that is not only so natural for us, but it's necessary to bring life into the world.
Yeah.
Right? And we know that the cells in our blood are so life-giving that it's actually incredible to use for gardening. And, you know, there's all kinds of ways that it can be utilized. So that's a whole journey in itself to tap into.
Totally.
And what you were explaining from that ceremony and the full moon that we did, I'm really grateful to my mentors and who I've had the opportunity of learning from in different indigenous cultures, from Native American cultures to an elder I worked with who had Mongolian roots. And so this journey of really coming back to the earth, of honoring all of these beings, all the elements are related to as beings. And one of the things that I love the most about that is that the sense of connection to everything that we have around us, that we're never alone. Right?
Yeah,
I think
exactly.
so often we feel alone in this world, and even this past year in the pandemic and having a lot of alone time, you know, the way that I would just go out and speak to the trees and speak to the earth and commune in that way brings just so much peace and so much contentment.
Yeah, so I remember when I came back home and I got my period the first time after that ceremony, I cried for the first time because I'm one of those people that have very painful periods, and it was always just such a drama in my life. And I hated being a woman because I bled, I was so disconnected from it. And I remember, like, because you mentioned something about just like getting the diva cup or the moon cup and like actually looking at it and like holding it. And even like if you want to put it in the crops or put it in and I did all those things. I felt like a crazy witch, but I was like, I don't care. I was like, this is amazing. And I'm getting so connected to myself. And I cried, and I finally was able to see the value and the beauty of who I am as a woman and what value it actually has. Yeah, it was a big shift for me, especially because, the retreat was based around being a goddess and what that entails, and kind of rewriting his story, right? And bringing to light the beautiful women that have been a part of the journey that maybe aren't talked about in history.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was a big part of it. And I feel like that's even just a big part of my mission in life. And who I've sought out in teachers and mentors are women who are on that same path, and how I can help other women tap into that within themselves as well, and how we can start to reclaim that part of ourselves by reclaiming these stories.
Yeah.
And going to those places on the earth where, Mallorca is one of those places, and Dea especially, where they honor the goddess, they honor the feminine, and there are these statues around the island. And, so that was one of the main reasons why we went there, which was so special.
Yeah. What would you say is happening right now in society with femininity and view on femininity? Because what we experienced was very beautiful, but I feel like at least here in the United States, there's so much hardening around being the feminine, not fully understanding what that is. So I'm curious what your thoughts are.
Mm-hmm. I like to think of this as energies too. So I'm going to talk about it in that way. And so the feminine energies are those of being, those of receiving, those qualities of the moon, of the shadow side, of darkness. And so there's that richness in that feminine quality of those energies. So I'm talking about this in energies rather than thinking of it as being in a body, if that is identified as like male or female.
Yeah, because we both have both feminine and masculine energy in all of us.
Right. So everyone has these energies, and they are manifested in different ways. So our masculine energies are those more of like the producing, the acting, the sun side, that kind of energy. And so we're bringing these more into balance now. And it's kind of like what I touched on earlier of really appreciating that space to create, that space to restore, that space to be. Oh my gosh, there's moments where I'm like, I just want to be. I don't want to do anything. So that's all part of it. And I think women are reclaiming this. Men are reclaiming this. There's a new permission that, I want to say permission and power in this feminine energy that is now kind of being tapped back into. It's also part of the whole shift of the age of Aquarius that we're coming into. It's the balance of both masculine and feminine, where we've been in this patriarchal society. Before then, we were in a matriarchal society thousands of years before that. And now it's not a time of one or the other. It's really a time of both. It's a time of balance.
Right.
So that's what we're coming into.
Yeah. So can you take us through, when we were in Mallorca, you had us do a specific prayer to each element. I just want to share it with everyone if it connects with them, because I know that when I wake up in the morning, I give thanks to all the elements and to Source.
Yeah. So one of the philosophies in indigenous cultures is, as I mentioned before, that everything is a being. So all the elements are a being, and they're addressed as all my relations. So we identify the sun as grandfather sun, and the moon as grandmother moon, and the sky as father sky, and the earth as mother earth, and all of the four-legged creatures and the insects and the winged ones and the finned ones are relatives and our cousins. So we probably did a ceremony in addressing each of those and honoring each of those and honoring the lessons and the gifts that we receive from all our relations, and including the elements of fire. It's also grandfather fire and mother ocean, and from the water and from the air and from the earth. And so what we receive, like really giving thanks for what we receive from all those elements, and also that all of those elements are part of us, and it's all one and the same.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, that's so beautiful. And I know that part of the subconscious work that we were doing, you had mentioned something that our subconscious mind operates 95% of the time. And you had us ask some questions that were, what pattern keeps me safe, limited, and small? And will I have to give this up in order to reach a new level? So I'm curious if you could talk more about that.
Yeah, sure. So going back to the development of our mind and our ego, our conscious mind, our subconscious mind, all of that development happens around the first 7 years of our life. And so we don't really have a conscious analytical mind until the age of 7. And when we're moving through our life, 95% of the time, it's our subconscious mind that is what is operating. That's what's calling the shots.
Crazy.
Right? It's mind-blowing. So when we think of like those roles that I talked about earlier, and the experiences that we had from that time of where 0 to 7, that is most of our subconscious mind. That's where it's been formed. So to actually be in our conscious mind, that takes the cultivation of awareness, of consciousness. It really takes our effort and practice, because we have to bring ourselves back into that again and again.
Right.
So that question that I touched on was to help you start to look at, what patterning from those fundamental years of your life keeps you limited, right? Holds you back in a way. And what was it that you ended up coming up with?
So I wrote it down. I said, I answered that I hold my value on the approval that others have on me, which leads me to give my power away. Because of my situation with my dad, I felt that I needed approval of men to validate my sense of self and feel worthy of love. And there was an added element of, after you gave us an exercise and said, every time just wake up in the morning and write whatever stream of consciousness and pay attention to it. And there was like this deep fear of me getting in trouble. There was like, I'm scared that I'm going to get in trouble with authoritative figures. And I was finding the parallels like in my life, that I was like scared to speak up about a simple thing that's kind of just stating my truth or stating my needs. And I shake, and I had an experience when I was little that I was told that the situation between my mom and my dad, when I was like seeing my real dad, because there was just so much conflict around it, that I had to keep it a secret or else I was going to get in trouble. And I was like around 4. And I remember my mom telling me that I would shake. So it's like, it's interesting how then I would start seeing how just that moment in time just shaped so much more of these subconscious ways that I was dealing with things.
Yeah. What a powerful reflection. Thank you so much for sharing that, and for even drawing those correlations. Because that's a really big one for a lot of people, is needing that approval externally. And, acknowledging that if you make decisions and how you do things in your life is purely to get that external approval, that's going to create a lot of suffering.
Yeah, absolutely. What would you recommend someone that they're just at home do to just start getting tapped into those subconscious thoughts? I mean, I would always recommend working with someone, obviously, because they, someone that has experience, but just to start it.
To notice a situation when you feel triggered or you feel reactive. If you can bring your awareness in that moment to how you're choosing to react, that's going to give you a lot of information. Because usually when we feel challenged or there's any bit of conflict, we react from that survival place. That part of our ego kicks in. That's that childhood part of us that's showing up to keep us safe. And we don't really need that anymore. It served its purpose for us when we were younger. We're alive, so that's awesome.
Yeah.
However, we don't need that part of us calling the shots any longer. So if we can start to bring some awareness to that, okay, I'm reacting this way. You know, I feel like I might get rejected right now, so therefore I'm acting in this particular way. To notice that that's what's happening is the first key.
Yeah. And then after realizing what the trigger is and how that comes up in life, what is our intention and what seed are we planting in order to move forward? And I put to embrace my deep feminine, that was my intention.
Lovely.
Yeah. So yeah, that's really, really special. But also, I know that part of this whole healing journey sometimes can feel or this type of work can feel so heavy, you know? And I don't think that it is heavy, and it can be heavy, but also on the other side of it, there's so much joy. And so I wanted to ask you, like, why do you think joy is necessary in the process for healing and staying on this path?
Yeah, it's absolutely necessary to bring that sense of lightness. You know, I love the saying that we can, like, the work we're doing is serious, but we can't take ourselves so seriously.
Yes.
So we really need to bring that lightness to ourselves. And that comes from acknowledging that we are in a messy human experience.
Yeah.
And it is the full spectrum.
We're all going through it. Like, there's no one's not going through it.
Exempt. No one's exempt.
We're all in this together.
And honestly, anyone who puts on the image that they're exempt is living a pretty painful experience, honestly.
Yeah.
So that can help bring some compassion when we witness that. And another piece of that is that joy is such a healing vibration. It's such a healing energy for us. It fills us up in a way that is necessary. It's not frivolous. You know, it's actually very necessary. And when you think of, children and how they play and the pure joy that comes through, that is literally food for the soul. And we need that just as much when we're adults. That doesn't go away. So bringing that into the process is absolutely necessary.
Yeah.
And I see it hand in hand. Literally, I think of this and how I work with clients as well, is hand in hand of going into those places that we've buried within us, those places that seem scary to go into. And when we go in there with someone that we feel safe with, and we can meet them and heal them, and we shed that light on them, that they don't carry that weight in us anymore.
Yeah.
They don't have that hold over us anymore.
Exactly. I like to think of it, the analogy that I've come up with recently is like going to the gym. When you're at the gym or when you're working out, it's painful in that moment, you know, when you're doing something extraneous and it's just but then you finish and you just feel so light and you have energy and just like everything just feels possible and like blood is pumping through your veins. That's the same feeling that I get with healing. Like if I'm going through healing something very difficult for me emotionally and it's coming out in like either me hyperventilating or crying or anything, like even though it feels so painful, in those moments my heart feels so open. And the next day and like the week, like just afterwards, it's like I feel like I've moved through something so buried down that I don't even want to name. Like I don't even know how to name it, but the level of joy that I'm able to feel is because I am able to feel the pain.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It's the yin and the yang. We have to know one to know the other. And until we know the depths of our pain, we'll never know the heights of our joy.
Yeah, I love that. Oh my God. Yeah.
That's the journey of the warrior.
Exactly.
It literally is. It takes courage to know both.
Yes.
Courage to hold both and to hold that entirety of our human experience.
Yeah, and that way we can all shift together onward. You know, it's like once you just accept that you know, because there's so many people that are in denial that there's anything that's going on beneath the surface. And there just has to, you know, just admit it. Like, it's okay. We all have it. We all have it. No one is exempt, like we said. And then like making light of it. Like, I call myself a witch. You know, I laugh at myself about these, you know, my daddy issues, like, you know, whatever. Cause it's like, we have to laugh at it. It's like, we're all going through it.
I love that you brought up, you know, the denial. I think touching on denial is really important in that.
Yeah.
In that conversation. And I think it's one thing that 2020 also lifted a veil of for us on so many levels.
Yeah.
And, you know, what we're releasing, what we're moving through, if we have the courage to do it, is that denial. And when we like lift that denial and actually meet the reality of what's there, we are in such an empowered place.
Oh, yeah.
It's so empowering. So I just wanted to offer that because that's just such a key of where we find ourselves in this moment. Especially after this past year and what is being revealed.
Yeah, the walk in the park that was 2020. But speaking of which, I would love if you shared your story of your witch experience of like.
Yes. So my witch story.
Oh my God, yes.
This is just really funny. The last place that I lived in, I was there for, oh my goodness, 10 years. And I moved early on in 2020. And shortly after moving into this place, I get a text from one of my old next door neighbors. And I lived in an old brownstone townhouse. So, you know, he could see my little back patio area. And he writes that the new tenants were outside on the back patio and talking with some friends they had over and saying, so apparently the woman who used to live here was like a real witch. Apparently she was like a Wiccan, I think you call it, or, you know. So he texted me this. I just burst out laughing.
It's hilarious.
And it actually made my year because, you know, I wrote him back and I said, well, they're not wrong. I would laugh all the time, the ceremonies I would have in this apartment. You know, here I am in the city and in Boston and, you know, having these ceremonies and working with these elements and just doing these things that if anyone I feel like were to be a fly on the wall would be like, what the heck is going on?
Yeah. And like, I own it 100%. And like, I do, you know, I love doing all of those things and ceremonies and things. And I actually had a friend of mine like live with me for like 2 weeks. And I'm like, listen, like, you're going to get the witch experience. Like, this is what I do with my time. And he was just like, everyone should live like this. I'm like, I know. And I'm like, yeah, like, welcome to like, join the club. Like, there's nothing weird about it. It's just that people, unfortunately, there's a huge stigmatized view of witches and this energy work and everything. And I know that you have an amazing way of talking about the history. If you can tell us about why witches.
Well, it goes back into the, you know, the whole patriarchal society we've been in for so long. And, you know, even back to like the Salem witch trials and how women were burned at the stake. And often that was because of a fear of not understanding how these women were actually healers, how they had the knowledge of working with plant medicines, and how they had this connection to the natural life. And so that power was feared. And to diminish that power, the stigmatism of the witch was then created. And so I think that history is actually really important to know in this reclaiming of the word of the witch, that really is a woman who is a healer.
Yeah.
She's in touch with the earth. She knows how to work with plants. She knows how to connect with her intuition and to connect with other entities. And it's really a gift. And with that comes ways of moving through the world and choosing to live our lives. And I think there's a place that we end up evolving to where life becomes our ceremony.
Yeah.
And that's also a philosophy of the red path of, indigenous cultures, that life is ceremony.
It is.
And it's such a beautiful way of existing. And I know when others would come into my old home or where I'm living now, they just say, oh, I have such a sense of relief. This is like a sanctuary. And I'm like, yes, it absolutely is. This is my sanctuary.
Yes. Anyone that enters my home is like, wow, it's so peaceful in here. And I'm like, yes, you're welcome. It's my witchery. Yeah. It's until people are, really, kind of opened to it. And some people still experience it and highly resist it because it's so new to them, because it takes such a time for you have, to shift to something that's new, that is kind of not the norm, because I feel like we've gotten so disconnected from nature, and we live in a concrete world, where there's cement and streets, and we're not connected to the elements anymore.
Yeah. And you're going to feel silly when something is unfamiliar. Think about any time you've started anything.
Exactly. But like you said, there's so much power. And usually if there's a lot of resistance, it's because you should move in that direction anyway. That's
right. That's very true. Following that resistance. And also, I would just say, for anyone who is exploring this path and feels called to, try discovering what rituals resonate with them or what ceremonies resonate with them, is to approach it really from a place of humility, of ask for guidance, ask that presence for guidance, and know that when you receive those messages, that intuition, that you're receiving the answers.
Yeah, exactly. So thank you so much. So we're actually going to go into just what a little mini session would look like for you, because I want people to be able to experience this work, and see an example of what it looks like. So it doesn't feel so scary to people that are going down this path.
Awesome. Yeah. So we touched on one of the things I'm loving right now, coming out of 2020, is helping people to start to integrate that. There is a huge wealth of wisdom that we can gain from what we experienced in 2020 and what we're still experiencing, where it's by no way done. So I'm not talking about it in that instance at all. So I wanted to ask you, Natalia, I'm going to ask you a few, like one big question, a few questions within that, but what would you say was your greatest lesson of 2020?
Oh God. Okay. So my greatest lesson was, it's symbiotic with a bunch of things, but I would say mostly knowing what it means to put my needs and myself before others. I spent a lot of time giving so much, that I never even knew to ask myself, what did I need? I would wake up in the morning and I was already being external, doing something. What do other people need? I felt validated in other people needing my help. That's how I found value for myself. When other people needed me is how. So I was completely ignoring all of my needs, and I wouldn't listen to my intuition. And that led for me to have relationships in my life where I couldn't assert any sort of boundaries. Yeah. And I allowed for people to treat me in a way that I had the philosophy, treat others how you would like to be treated. So I would always treat everyone with the utmost respect and everything. And when I wouldn't get in return, I would suffer. Instead of like switching it and saying how I just put myself first. So it led to me having catastrophes with like roommate situations and with like a love partnership that didn't serve me, and I couldn't get out of it, because I was always just putting those other person's needs before my own and not valuing what I needed, and moving from that direction. And that made me not assert my power or assert my sense of self from a place of compassion that could be easily communicated. So it created a lot of conflict because I went into that place. I became the scared little Natalia that just couldn't, that was shaking and couldn't say anything because I was so scared to assert and speak a need that was mine.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You've done a lot of good reflective work on it as you explain there.
Because there was a lot of explosive situations that came out of it, right? Like it wasn't just like I just sat there. Like it was, it was big argumentative experiences. It was times where like I would go out of my way to do something and then I was met with like anger and I couldn't understand. So,
and those situations happened in 2020. Were those like the catalyzing experiences that allowed you to really wake up and say, what's happening here?
Oh yeah. 100%. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Situations that, I think I was used to conflict. I thought that conflict was normal.
Mm-hmm.
And when it was happening around me, all I wanted to do was be peaceful, but I kept on attracting people and situations that were very conflictive and that would not allow, like, wouldn't listen to me. And that, so I, in turn would give my power away. And I just be like, oh, no, like they need something, like it's like, if they need it, then like I'll show up for them.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does completely. Yeah, that's what happens when you're raised in an environment where there is codependency and there isn't, your parents perhaps don't have the best boundaries and don't know how to teach you to have boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Definitely not.
So then how that shows up, and as you touched on earlier, saying that out of those four roles, the caregiver, right, that the ego starts to create as the child for survival, and your ability to give, and how you realized that, especially in some of these specific situations in the past year, which were your breaking point, so to say, of where you really lost yourself in them, that you were over giving, and how you had lost your needs within all of that.
Yeah, I mean, the perfect example was like me working for a nonprofit, which I was so grateful for the experience for, but I couldn't, I was putting the needs of the company and of the needs of the mission and the collective before the needs of myself. Things were breaking down all, like, I had to borrow money. I had to, like, it was just not a fun way to live. I just found myself in situations where I had to compromise so much of who I was in order to serve something greater. And I just always felt empty and depleted at the end of it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So this is a huge gift that you received, perhaps maybe didn't intend to get, but received, of knowing what it means to put your needs first. So you know what it means to put your needs first. How do you do that? Tell me, how are you going to do that?
I started by understanding and knowing myself, meaning taking actions. Like, for example, I know that I need to live alone. And before, I used to lie to myself all the time because I'm very sensitive to energy. Like if you feel something, like I feel it. Like I'm very sensitive. And I was running away from my sensitivity. I hated the fact that I was so sensitive. So I was trying to one up myself and be like, it's okay, you can handle it. Let's have roommates. And that caused so much internal conflict in myself that was like number one. It was like, okay, I need to live alone. Mm-hmm. And I had to really sit with myself and say, what are I had never asked myself what my needs are. It was when I took that month off, because after I decided to step down from the nonprofit, I probably cried for an entire month because I didn't understand who I was outside of the role that I had played, or what I wanted my life to look like. Yep. And then simultaneously, I had this like tumultuous roommate situation where, of course, I attracted someone that was a taker, and every time that I would offer something would take more and more and more, and wouldn't respect any sense of my boundaries because I didn't know how to assert them. to the point that it became like, I've never had to block anyone in my life. Like that's never been a thing, but it got to the point where I felt scared to be in my own house.
That's horrible.
Yeah, no, it's awful. It's like, and the worst part is that I couldn't even say it. I couldn't even stand up for myself. And if you were ever to see me, it's like, oh, but Natalia has no problem speaking things. But when it comes to like really conflict like this, like I become a baby, a child.
Yeah. So you know you need to live alone. What are some other needs that you know now?
That there are days that I have to disconnect from technology and connect to nature, and that I have to be okay with whatever backlash I get if someone doesn't think I'm available in my mind, right? Like if my mom calls me or someone wants to talk to me, before I would be like, oh, I'm in the middle of something, but I would just answer the phone because someone was calling me and they probably need me. As opposed to being like, can I answer the phone now? Do I turn off my phone to have some me time so I can recharge? Or am I in a place to be available if someone needs me?
Yeah. Yeah, excellent. So you know that is something that you need to make a priority, is time to disconnect from technology and to really connect with nature. I love that, because when we start to become gain more understanding about our energy, when we think of technology, our phone or computer, and that energy is always going out, it's very fragmented, and we start to feel fragmented, right? I mean, think of how much you're scrolling through on social media, and just, it's very chaotic and distracting. So that becomes fragmented in our energy. When we are connected to nature, or say you're meditating or you're doing something like that to nourish yourself, the energy is actually like reconsolidating. It's going inward. So you're beginning to feed yourself on a new level. That's why you feel much more stable.
I do. I moved by myself. I created a morning ritual. I try not to turn on my phone at least 2 hours after I wake up. Sometimes it doesn't happen, and that's when I know that I'm off center. And I really try to give myself 2 hours before I start work. I had to like make a work schedule for myself. Like, I'm not going to answer anything that's work related before 10 a.m. And then I have to take a break. So I put like specific timers on my phone, and I don't just say, oh, I gave myself a deadline, 8:30, no more computer or phone. So I had to like create those for myself, but I still slip up all the time. Like it's challenging.
Definitely. Yeah. So good job. What other needs did you identify?
The need of me having to work out, and the need of me taking care of my body with the food that I put in it. Because I'm a workaholic, so I can work through an entire day and not eat. It actually like happened this morning. I was just like, if it takes me 10 more minutes to do this interview, like I need food in my body. Like my body was like, I'm hungry. And I'm like, okay, I got you. I'm going to feed you. Yeah. Because I could work 8 hours straight, 10 hours straight, and completely forget to eat because I'm just so consumed in what I'm doing. But taking those breaks, and then also I then put myself with practitioners that were going to aid that. So I hired an Ayurvedic practitioner, and I did a cleanse in my body so I could get more connected to my body, and started the Abhyanga, which is a self-oil massage, where I started realizing that I could actually heal like my ailments, like the parts of my body that hurt. I started getting connected, like, ooh, that hurts there. And like, I had never spent so much time touching my body.
Abhyanga is a beautiful practice.
It
really
is.
Beautiful practice. Yeah.
I didn't know about it, and then I started doing it. And yeah, when you spend time touching your body and knowing where the kinks are, you get such a deeper connection to your needs, which I'm like, oh, I need to release the tension on this. Like I have a lot of tension here. Like it just creates this whole ripple effect.
Definitely. Nice. So that is helping you to actually gain greater embodiment. Like you're literally coming into your body, you're touching your body, you are literally physically feeling what my body needs. And in that process too, starting to learn, like, what does loving touch feel like?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Giving myself loving touch.
Mm-hmm.
So that's beautiful.
Well, this was part of the work that I couldn't do when I lived with someone because that was way too vulnerable for me to even do behind closed doors. But now that I felt the freedom, that's why step one was like moving in alone. And now that I have that freedom, I can really explore. And I've given myself hugs and kisses, and like I actually feel myself. Before October of last year, like I didn't feel myself like physically, my body. I mean, I did yoga, but it was to calm my mind as opposed to actually touching my body.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, embodiment practices are so essential right now for us to really just drop in and be in our bodies, to be grounded. So this is great. So you identified the need for working out, for caring for your body. From that, it stemmed into learning about Abhyanga, this, self-care of the self-massage and learning about your body that way. So let's do one or two more of the needs that you identified. What else?
Oh God, what other needs? Another need that I saw was that I needed to fully be able to look at myself in the mirror and love myself and see myself how I would want any romantic partner to look at me. So I would do like eye gazing, and it came with a lot of crying of me actually looking in deep into my eyes for like 15 minutes at a time.
Yeah. Can you explain what that emotion was that came up when you were doing it?
Yeah, it's like I felt like I saw myself like for the first time ever. Like I felt like I was seeing the light that I am. Like when it allowed me to understand what it means to have self-love. It's not about the external things and also that I can take care of myself. Like I have my spine, and if I'm alone right now in my world, that I can take care of myself.
Mm-hmm.
And it just created a lot of like depth of seeing myself and just being like, oh my God, like, wow, everybody has always told me how beautiful my eyes are. And I was like, thanks. And then I actually got to see how beautiful my eyes were. And like, actually, I was like, wow, Natalia, your eyes are so beautiful. Like, I was like actually saying that to myself. I had never done that before.
What a gift.
Yeah.
The greatest gift. Especially when you consider back to one of your biggest limitations, which is that need for external approval.
Mm-hmm.
So literally in identifying this, of needing to look at yourself like you would want a romantic partner to, that you tapped into self-love, that this is the imprint, this is the feeling, this is the quality of what self-love looks like, feels like, how it's expressed.
Mm-hmm.
And you were able to give that to yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it doesn't matter. Like, it's nice, obviously, if I get it from someone else, but I know it. I see it in myself, and it's rippled into like me actually feeling sexy and like me actually feeling good about myself. And when someone compliments me, it's just like an added bonus, but I don't need it to feel like good about me.
Yeah, exactly. That's it. Those compliments are not creating your value. You're creating your value.
Mm-hmm.
You're giving that to you. And so what I'm hearing as you say that is a true sense of confidence, or a new sense of confidence that you have.
I would say merging my external confidence that I put out in the world with my internal way that I view myself. Like I feel like it's finally coming together. Because I have like an on switch, and when I'm gonna have an on switch, like I'm on. But then when it's an off switch, sometimes it gets a little messy and lost.
Mm-hmm. So with the merging of that confidence, and you're saying how this is like rippled out, what does that feel like for you? What does that feel like in your body as you move through the world?
Yeah, it feels lighter. I feel lighter. I feel like I realize how much I love dancing. and I love expressing myself through dance. And I do it alone now, like in my apartment all the time and sing. And like I've been able to like tap more into my creativity. I feel more relaxed. Like I don't feel so anxious anymore. It comes up, of course, still my anxiety, but I'm able to really sit back with myself and be like, no, it's okay. Or I find when I really am seeking for someone to give me a compliment, I'm like, oh, okay, it's time for me to like do some self-love.
Beautiful. I love that. That last piece is really important. When you see yourself seeking for that external validation of recognizing that it's time for you to really practice it internally.
Yeah. And I'm able just to be happier and move through difficult things more quickly than I think I did in the past. So overall, I feel more confident about myself, and it's hard. Sometimes I like really meet my edge when things are very challenging for me of like putting myself out there, and then I just say, okay, I got to do it anyway. If it's emotional, I cry and I release it, and then I move on.
Wonderful. That's great. So these are some really good concrete needs that you have identified out of this new awareness, right? So you had these certain circumstances that came up in the past year, these catalyzing moments that woke you up to saying, hey, I'm being completely drained. I need to actually look at my boundaries. I need to find out what they are. I need to bring in some boundaries, like really nourish myself. And so from that, you were able to identify, some of these core things of living alone, of disconnecting from technology and letting yourself really connect inward to yourself and to nature, of working out, of paying attention to how you nourish yourself through food, as well as how you nourish yourself through touch and embodiment. And that also, as you're cultivating this approval from the inside of learning how to look at yourself through that lens of self-love, of offering yourself that gift, and looking at yourself as you would want a romantic partner to look at you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because thank you. Yeah, it's been a very interesting last 6 months, but I think that what it resulted to was me actually feeling, and I talk about this, like me actually feeling happy on my birthday, which has been a very painful experience for me because it was like the day that I equated to, okay, I give to the world every other day, like the birthdays where I get it all back. And I put so much pressure on that. And I was putting so much pressure on getting it externally. So this year I gave it to myself. I gave myself the birthday of my dreams. And I was like through the moon. Like I have had the best birthday I've ever had in my life.
Amazing. Amazing. And that's how it manifests. Mm-hmm. Right? That's how it really shows up, how we start to create it in our life. So I love that I feel like this brought us full circle to, your first question of how do we create happiness in our life? Because this is really such a concrete example that we just went through of, what was this great challenge that came up in the past year? What was the knowledge that was gained from it? What was the wisdom that was gained from it? Because when we don't stop to receive that information, we're blocking ourselves from receiving the gift. Like that is the gift for you now.
Yeah, which I had ignored for so long. Mm-hmm. And I was driving myself to the ground. After that last experience, I said, no more. I said, no more. I don't want this to be my life anymore. I don't want to suffer. I don't want to anymore.
Mm-hmm. Good work. Seriously, because, when we don't receive the lessons, we stay in the same pattern and we get that lesson again and again and again. So when we can look at a situation and say, okay, I'm in this, it's a big challenge. What am I learning from it? It might not be what I signed up for. I definitely thought I was getting some other outcome, that's for sure.
Yes, always. I mean, you always do things with the best intentions and then...
Of course, yeah. And then, but if we really take a step back and say, okay, well, what did I actually learn? that's what is invaluable. That's what we carry with us. That's what continues to shift. So looking forward, what are your intentions for this year?
Actually, taking all of what I said and continuing to integrate it into my life, because like I said, I slip up all the time. I still have a hard time truly feeding myself. I still have a hard time creating like a workout schedule that works for me, that I can like look past. Or sometimes I wake up and my mind is going a million miles a minute and I pick up my phone. So I understand that I place those things. Sometimes I go weeks without giving myself a self oil massage. But it's like, okay, I know all, and I have all these tools and I've implemented them, and how can I implement them more and more and more, so it just becomes like a way of life for me, as opposed to just like, okay, you need to do all of these things by like 10 a.m.
Right. So one recommendation that I would make is to write them up on something, like write them up on note cards or put them on a piece of paper. And I like to get kind of crafty or creative with them, but you know, maybe write them really beautifully. Maybe there's an image you even want to put with them, but put them somewhere that you're going to see them and you're going to have that reminder every day. And so, because these, what you just identified a few, and you probably have more, but just working with these that you identified are priorities for sustaining you. And you can't do any of the other stuff that you want to do or really show up in the world the way that you want to show up in the world if you aren't full, if you're not nourished and like full of energy. So that's got to be the top priority. So putting them somewhere where you're going to see them every day. And then the next thing is to schedule them in. So I know for us, life is really busy. If it doesn't make its way into my calendar, it's easy to forget about it. So actually put it into your calendar.
Okay.
And then lastly is, you know, all of us just need support. So sometimes we need to find the right person that's going to support us, that's going to hold us accountable, that is going to help give us more skills or more tools when something might not be working, and because life continues to happen and we continue to change. So that's where, you know, having lots of great guided support comes in.
Thank you so much. And I know that because I've been doing this work for so long, I'm able to come up with these answers really quickly, but I just want everyone to know that it took me a very long time to come, probably like 6 months, for me to really delve into what I shared today. And it's because I have people like Carolyn and other people that I work with in order to hold that space so I can actually discover it. So with that being said, I want to ask, if anyone feels called to work with you, how can they reach out to you? How can people find you and follow you? And what are your next projects?
So people can find me through my website, which is the best way to keep up with new events and things I have going on. You can put in your email, join my newsletter. I send it sparingly, so don't worry, but there is really good information in it every time, in addition to what events are happening, but also tangible information that'll be helpful for your life. You can also find me on social media, on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, by my name, and or Live, Thrive, Love with Carolyn Little. Upcoming, I have, I'm really excited about this project, Natalia, because I'm missing the retreats that I lead. I love them so much. And we talked about how important it is, like, curating this experience. So I am curating an at-home retreat experience for people to have. So it's going to feed every one of your senses. And in addition to be taken through yoga, meditation practices, and things like that, you'll also be taken through these beautiful rituals of a specific herbal tea blend that's going to support you at this time of year, of a facial and a bath soak or a foot soak, and all these herbs and the benefits of them and why we're choosing to use those. So it's going to be a really beautiful experience where you're going to receive a physical package and have the items you need, So you can drop right into this home retreat experience as easily as possible. Deeply nourish yourself and rejuvenate and rest and love up on yourself.
I love it. Oh my God, sign me up. I'm in. Awesome. And where can we find out about that?
It'll be coming out soon. So there's going to be a limited amount this first time. So great to sign up for my newsletter on my website, livethrivelove.com, or through social media on Instagram would be the best. The items that I'm going to be including in the package are all carefully sourced from really amazing women entrepreneurs who beautifully craft these items. So there's also this element of not only are you nourishing yourself, but you're supporting other women in their art and their business.
Oh, I love that.
So there will be little stories too of each woman and why she is doing this work. So there's a lot of meaning and intention within this.
I love it. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. I want to thank you so much for your time and for your wisdom and just for everything. I hope that everyone can gain something from this episode, because I know I did and I continue to. And just to end things off, I always like to end things off with a little dance party. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Mwah. Bye, everyone.
Bye. Thank you again.